My next guest has gotten a name, criticizing public squandering, making cultural politics a natural topic. Instead of arm-length distance, he has found friendships, and in the guise of objective criteria, he has revealed political activism. This has mysteriously led some to perceive him as a threat to the freedom of expression of artists. Consequently, he was unwanted at the annual meeting of the Culture Council of Norway last year. Instead, the squandering ombudsman has been reduced to appearing on the cave of Apelles. And I am indeed glad to have you on our show.
It's my honor. Thank you.
I've been following you for a couple of years, but you are a Norwegian phenomenon with 60,000+ followers now?
Yeah, something like that.
So what is the whole thing about the squandering ombudsman?
Well, we are a group of friends. We used to, back in the days in 2014, we typically sent emails to each other about stupid things the government spent money on, and laughed about that. And then we came upon a Swedish Facebook phenomenon called Sløseriombudsmannen, the same name. Mm. So to be fair, we copied that concept and started this in Norway with Norwegian content. We had the hypothesis that the Norwegian government would waste just as money as the Swedish, or not worse. And
has that been proven?
I think it's fair to say that we have enough content to run a Facebook page about about this. Yeah, so this was in 2014. Our content is not limited to the art world at all. Initially, we didn't come into that part of the world years later, but the Facebook page grew from the beginning, and yeah, I think it's become quite popular.
Because of course, why we wanted to have you on here is that you have in the but for how long then been concerned with cultural politics in the name of the squandering ombudsman?
Well, I think the first time I slipped into this magical world was in 2017. Mm-hmm. Almost by accident, I think. I came across a video of a performance by an artist that had received quite a good amount of money from the government. I didn't think much about it. My view was only to talk about the spending of the tax money.
So just to interject that, you didn't really come into cultural politics, the part of it, for some specifically cultural ideological reason.
No.
It's just one area where the state spends money.
Right. No, I did not try to target specific artists based on my view of art, because, well, to be honest, I didn't have any, at least not at that time. But I found a video I thought would be fun to show to my viewers, and it was a woman who had applied for funding from the Cultural Council. I think she got perhaps $300,000 per year. And so, you know, on Facebook you can program a post to appear in the future. So I did that. I went for a run, and during my run my phone rang. And apparently this had gone viral during my run in the forest of Oslo. Uh-huh. So then I got a call from Dagbladet, the newspaper.
National newspaper.
Yes. So yeah, so that had gone viral. It had...
so more so than with just other posts that you had made about public squandering in other fields?
Yeah, absolutely. At the time, it was by far the most popular thing I had posted. Uh-huh. Part of it is Facebook wants to promote videos show to its viewers. So it overlapped with Mark Zuckerberg's interest to compete with YouTube, I guess. Yeah. So this video had been shared hundreds of times just the first couple of hours.
Wow.
And 99% of the comments were people were shocked that the government spent money on this.
Right.
Here in Norway, we are familiar with the idea that the Norwegian government spends a lot of money. We already know that. But even within that frame, people were shocked that someone got money to do this.
Mm-hmm. Now, I think a major component of your shall we say, character is precisely the anonymity. Was that something consciously chosen, or did that just become a thing because of like for whatever reason?
Well, first of all, it's fun to be an anonymous internet troll, of course. So it makes it more fun for me. But there's some more reasons. This Facebook page has been, well, it's not just me personally who has been running it. So it makes it possible to share this among different people. And also lately it's a specific reason, because I have been invited or challenged by one artist.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a long story, but try and make it short. So one of my Christmas calendars, I was received a request from one artist. Most artists just hate me, but one artist demanded to be a part of this Christmas calendar. So I thought that was fun. I'm up for the challenge. So and then we later met. So his name is Morten Tråvik. We later met, and he wants to start a new show, or yeah, I don't know. Like
well, it's a theater, not a theater play, but a theater performance.
I don't have the words for...
It's beyond words!
Yeah, beyond words. But it was supposed to be in May this year, but it was cancelled due to coronavirus, whatever. But so I promised to him to try to keep this anonymity at least until that show has started. Mm-hmm. Perhaps it will be revealed there, or the audience might have an opportunity to find out. We'll just have to wait and see.
After you've left the building.
So the Wastefulness Commission, I believe the first show will be this summer, probably in May. So yeah, keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, but and so. You mentioned, I don't know if you could talk about that, but there's been some consequences in that context for Mr. Tråvik.
Yeah, right. I should have mentioned that. He has for a long time been a sort of controversial artist. I think he's most known for his projects in North Korea. He's been traveling there for
some bullet points on that.
Yeah. Well, he's been there 15, 20 times, I believe. And one of his projects, he wanted to invite a Slovenian rock band to have the first rock concert in North Korea. So that was a big thing. But during this project, he was accused here in Norway of being a useful idiot for the North Korean regime, which is a pretty big, strong accusation. But within the art field, that was no one cared about that.
So he was defended then, because I mean, the project that you're talking about, he got public funding for that, right, from the Norwegian state.
Yes, yeah. Yes. He receives the type of funding where it doesn't apply for each individual project. He has a
annual
thing that runs a couple of more years. So being a useful idiot for a North Korean regime, that was not that accusation did not stick at all in the art community. But then, once he got involved with the Squander Ombudsman, that was a different thing. So so then it means I'm one step above the North Korean dictator in that sense in the Norwegian art community. So I find that hilarious. That's one of my biggest achievements, I think, as a anonymous internet troll, even worse than the North Korean regime. So that's fun.
And then we get to something that you've been doing, well, actually not this year, but you've been making a Christmas calendar.
Right.
I think that has gotten really a lot of attention. I mean, the amount of likes and shares and total views have been just amazing. And that is focused solely on, specifically people within theater, performance, getting grants or getting money.
Right. So the Cultural Council in Norway, on their website, they have probably 70 or 80 different programs through which they give money. So what I did after this first video, where not only my followers thought this was totally ridiculous, I also got a lot of feedback from the art community, and specifically the kind of art community that is funded by the tax money.
What would they say?
They generally thought it was horrible for someone to to reveal this madness. You could really feel the frustration there. Mm-hmm. And I also have to admit a small mistake, because I referred to the funding as a wage to this person. Mm-hmm. It wasn't coded as a wage in the accounting system of the Cultural Council. She had to spend that money on some expenses too. Mm. But so they picked that as something to go after, to call it fake news, although it doesn't matter for me whether you call it a wage or a grant or a stipend.
Right.
My issue is that these $300,000 per year is something that goes out of the taxpayers' pockets anyways. So they picked that as a sort of excuse to brand that as fake news. But I was so surprised by the amount, like the intensity of the criticism. So it made me think a lot more about this, that there's something that goes a little bit deeper than just $300,000 wasted.
Right.
So I guess this inspired me to look further into the what are they funding, what kind of people gets money, and what have they produced out of that. And fortunately, the Norwegian government is very good at They are
openness.
Openness, yeah. It's not difficult to find out where the money actually goes. So I started looking up what have the other artists that received the most amount of funding, what have they done? And it turns out this first video I found was not an anomaly. So I put this into a Christmas calendar the next December. I think it was in 2017. Yeah, so then the ball started rolling even with even more momentum.
Yeah, because I think that really catalyzed your popularity. Am I correct?
Yeah, I think it was more people found the Facebook page at that time. Yeah.
Because I think perhaps people have a sort of closer connection to culture or art, if you want to call it, than they do to, for example, big hospital plans or whatever. I mean, it's also the sums are to some degree more relatable?
Yes, it's often difficult. This is a problem. It's often difficult to relate to the large numbers when it's a large abstract project. It's difficult to comprehend what is $1 billion compared to.
But tell me first a short sort of a couple of bullet points on what typically gets funding, and then I want to ask you a bit about what kind of because we know there are certain buzzwords that you need to use to get public funding. But first, just like a couple of examples from your Christmas calendar.
Right. So initially, I was just looking at one of these 70, 80 programs where to get funding for performance art.
Not sure the also English, theater, not only.
Yeah, that's a sort of. There are two different programs. The one for what they call theater, one for just performing arts in general. So or stage art. I'm not sure if that's the English word even, but so it's a kind of a project, a program where you apply for funding for one specific project. And on the website, you can see who gets the funding, and you can see a part of the text they send to the Culture Council to get their project approved, and that's also very interesting. It revealed to me that almost every project has a political element.
It's great. So give us some of those buzzwords then. Like what would a typical application look like?
Yeah. So sometimes these things can be very difficult to see based on the video I show. For example, it was one video that became quite popular. It was two women just rolling around on the floor, screaming, drooling, and the point of that was to illustrate. It was, let me see, it's difficult to put these words in my mouth even, but it was based on, it was supposed to illustrate a feminist point about some old psychiatric diagnosis, where, for example, hysteria was a diagnosis in psychiatry aimed specifically at women. And so they demonstrated the hysteria in a quite good way. But the kind of text they sent in, you would assume that this is deeply well thought out project attempting to improve the position of women across the world. But it's two women lying around at the floor screaming, basically.
The point is that the application text, the actual application itself, was entirely political or clearly politically oriented?
Yeah, it's. I'm not saying it's tied to a specific political party, but they seem to target some buzzwords or try to fit it into a feminist agenda, even though the actual performance made probably almost no sense in that regard. But in their mind, that was a good key to get funding. Yeah. Because
I went through your Christmas calendar, and a lot of these things that runs through it. For example, one is about criticizing the increasing individualism, and saying that the performance has in part chosen a Maoist activist stance. I mean, it's pretty clear the political aspect of it. Also, I mean, you can perhaps talk a little bit about this specific project that got funding for revealing racism.
Oh, that's a lot of them probably. Well, the thing, but that's almost every project. But
which one?
Well, the Maoist, I think that was funny. Like in the first, why bring Mao into this, a mass murderer who left tens of millions of bodies behind him? And this performance was, the excerpt I showed was a person rolling around in what's supposed to be poop inside a public toilet. Apparently that brings Maoist elements into modern society, criticizing individualism. You know, it's just a joke, but that text probably sounded good in someone's ears, among the bureaucrats. And it's also interesting to notice here and there that these are not just random jokers who wants to have fun. Like this person I think he was associate professor at the College of Music in Oslo. So yeah, these people are well educated while they are lying down on the floor screaming and playing with their poop.
Yeah, because one thing that I'm really quite concerned with, and I think we'll get to at least the latter part of the conversation, to talking about alternatives or what could be done. Should you abolish the system or reform it, or but what we have to talk a little bit first about what is wrong with it. And that is what I really object to when it comes to cultural politics, that when you say we shall have culture, but instead you get political propaganda, then you are cheating people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And this trend is definitely going on. And what I even see as a trend now is we're moving into a situation where you not only have to pack this political message into your performance, you can almost leave the performance alone. You just sit there like you and me talk about politics, and you can get a theater stipend or a theater scholarship for that. So the politics has definitely become the front line here. Yeah,
and I think that's, you know, from the sort of ideological perspective, I've been thinking about that lately, because like when you have, I don't know how that translates, it's like the art college, or what you would call it, you know, higher education for art in Norway. They have now been really clear about introducing, for example, critical race theory into their curriculum, that should be, and colonial studies and these things. And actually people working within the art field itself, doing what is definitely within the boundaries of approved contemporary art, they are also starting to object to it, because to some degree, of course, you want to have a specific knowledge. You want to acquire specific knowledge when you go to some school, right?
You would think that.
Yeah. So I think that's that point, and also what I noticed from one specific article that you sent to me. Maybe we could talk about that. This thing about how one thing is the political activism, referring to criticism of capitalism or criticism of individualism, or focusing on the male gaze, or whatever these buzzwords that they are using. In addition to that, you have the focus on or things that is becoming purely political. As you say, you don't have to really make something, and this is sort of like the next generation of art, sort of art 2.0, where you don't even paint anymore. I mean, with modernism, at least people painted, right? But now they're leaving that all together, and it's pure ideology.
I don't know what to say more about that, but it's through every part of every text I've seen these people write, they are political activists, definitely.
Right.
And it was a few students at our local art college who labeled the worst labels you can find, racist, fascist, and their demand was, we want an actual education where you can learn a craft. Exactly. That alone, if you focus on, like, we want to learn a craft here, that is, then you're a racist because you're rebelling against these new ideals.
Yeah. And I think that's where it really becomes problematic, when it becomes pure politics. I mean, you know, certain examples stick in your mind. And as I think I mentioned to the art sociologist, Dag Solil I had here, you have examples, for example, from Austria, where a man got a scholarship or a grant for having written a novel with a political activist that was skeptical of some a populist figure on the political right, and to the degree that they had to kill him. And of course, everybody understood that this was Jörg Haider, the political leader of the Freiheitlichen Party. And the point is not if you agree with that party or not, but that someone is paid to make political propaganda and even clearly suggesting murder of political opponents. And that is not culture. Then it's political propaganda, and it becomes language policing and opinion policing.
Yeah, and I think they feel that this is a good place to insert politics, because artists have a different form of protection in a way. We all like free speech, and we don't want to attack artists in the same way as political rivals can attack each other. But then if you force the politics through that channel, you sort of have a free pass to do other things that you can't do elsewhere, I guess. And
I'll get to the thing about the article I mentioned and friendships within the Culture Council and these things. But you've actually started to get some a little bit of institutional power. Maybe we should go past that, and we'll get to the nepotism or the camaraderie of state support of the arts. What has happened because of your? I think that's because of your Christmas calendar.
Yeah, you mean the latest news about the budget cut? Or
start with that.
Well, I noticed that more and more politicians have followed the page, and people often ask have I really achieved anything? Usually I've just said I've created a lot of humor. People have laughed about this, but couldn't really point to any specific case where I posted something and then that had any consequences for people. But it was a couple of months ago. It was the Progress Party.
So
one political
most
party.
Libertarian party in the parliament, I guess you could say.
Yeah, probably. They posted they used to be a part of the government, but they left. So now they make their own budget, which they use to try to find a deal with the government. So in their alternative budget, they wanted to cut, I think it was around $40 million from the fund that distributes money to artists.
They wanted to cut it by half, wasn't it?
Yes, yes. Yeah, so that was quite a big deal. Initially, I didn't have high hopes for that because...
I mean, you didn't start out with hopes, I guess.
No. It was never an ambition to change the world, because that would be a horrible headwind. I would be crying at this point. But my hope was just to have fun and be a bit sarcastic and have fun in this wild spending spree. But what happened was, the government, they know they have to negotiate with this Progress Party to get their budget approved. And it turned out that they took this little bit, this one idea about the cultural council. It doesn't really roll off my tongue, this word, but...
Say cancel culture.
Yeah, like you did initially. But they actually tried to get some leverage in the negotiation using that point. So they were able to cut the budget with 10 million kroner.
For the Culture Council, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's a drop in the ocean.
Well, it's their taxi
money.
Expenses, I guess.
Right, yeah.
But,
and
please, can I stop you there?
Yeah.
Can you tell us how much each member of the Culture Council spends each year on traveling? You had a specific number.
Right. I forgot the very specific number.
Wasn't it $8,000?
I think it was, I think it was 70-something thousand kroner, which is $8,000. Yeah.
I mean, I know that from before also, because Nerdrum was actually on the Culture Council in the 90s, a shorter period for the Progress Party, and he just told me like they were going around the block, they would take the taxi.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I have heard through my unofficial channels, that despite all the talk about environmentalism in their funding...
and the application form.
Yeah, they do not, the top bureaucrats do not like to take the bus. And they like to fly around the world and go to exhibitions and meet colleagues in Japan, Australia. So you can travel a lot for $8,000 per year, and that's average spending, including all the low-level bureaucrats. So that's a lot of business class flights, and and they let's see, the actual spending of the council.
Give us some numbers.
Is crazy. You can see how much they spend on their facilities, their offices, which is per person. It's way above the norm for the finest part of the financial district. Right. So they are big spenders, and actually I think the artists should also be worried about that. Sometimes I think most artists think of themselves as in an alliance with this cultural council. They think of them as a benevolent master in a way. But they spend a lot of the money before it's passed to the poor artist.
Do you know, I mentioned it to you, and I know it's a difficult piece of math to do, but do you know, like if you want to give an artist, speaking in dollars, $5,000, do you know how much has to go into the system for $5,000 to come out at the other end? Is there any kind of math on that?
I think that the Cultural Council's own budget, that they spend around 10% of the money which is distributed. But also
on running the council.
Right. Yeah. But
and their budget is what's that in dollars? It's 1.4 billion crowns. So it would be $140 million.
Maybe that's an old figure because they serve a different programs that they give money through. So if you summarize all of their programs, I think they distribute about 2 billion kroner.
Right.
And their own spending is over 200 million kroner now.
Jesus Christ. But to be fair, I mean, it's not all for performance art and theater plays. They do conservation of cultural goods or whatever, stuff like that too, right?
Right.
Institutions.
Movies,
right.
music.
Right.
So.
Yeah. There's so many examples to talk about, but okay, getting then to the another part of the sort of the moral problem with state support of the arts. Can you tell us a little bit about that article in the newspaper you mentioned when it comes to who gets grants?
Yes, so I understand it's a problem. How do you find people to pick and choose who gets to receive the money? It's difficult to find someone completely outside this environment.
And it's a small country, to be fair.
Yeah, it's a small country. It's centered in Oslo. You need someone with knowledge of the art field to find proper recipients of the funding. So of course it leads to usually you sit in a council for 2 years. You send out money. You know everyone basically. So people give money to their friends. Then 2 years later, you are back in your life as a regular artist, and then the people you gave money to last year, now they are in the council.
And you have specific examples of that in your, is it last year's or 2018's Christmas calendar?
Yes.
Specific examples on that. You don't have to go into detail about it, but I mean, you're not just making it up. You're pointing to concrete persons sitting there getting money when they are out of the council. The other person that they like, give them money.
Yeah, definitely. Then this is not my invention either. I have to mention one anecdote. I thought it was funny. In this calendar, I posted one video where in my comment I said, wow, these people actually received funding. It doesn't seem like they personally are in this small niche of people. So wow, good for them. And then I checked her Facebook page a couple of days later, and then she said, he should have done a better job. I was on the council 2 years ago. So yeah. So I made a mistake, and she found corrected.
I mean, that shows some self-confidence.
Yes.
Then you're quite confident that you will not be criticized, that you are untouchable. That you can basically admit to corruption publicly, and it has no consequence.
Definitely, they know that they are safe. They are in a safe small haven of the world. They can do things that would not be allowed anywhere else, which is fun to talk about. And yeah, this article we've sort of touched upon. I was impressed by a couple of journalists who gathered all the applications. They found out who had sent the application and who had approved the applications, and even who are Facebook friends with each other.
Right. Do you remember the numbers there?
Well, one of the findings, it was that if you have at least one Facebook friend among the people who approve the application, your chance doubles of getting funding, which is very statistically significant. And of course, the people who approved this were contacted by the journalists. They did not see the problem at all. They felt like they could make an independent decision, even if they had been friends for a long time. They had 50 common friends on Facebook. They had worked together, no problem in their mind.
Yeah.
So they don't care. It would not be accepted elsewhere.
Yeah. And I think one really interesting thing is that when you talk about this topic, I often meet, or it's sort of just below the surface, that you're just complaining about that because you belong to the classical figurative painters, and you describe yourself as victims, and you're sort of grumpy for not getting any grants. But in that article, there are two artists, and one of them is really clearly an artist being very, very politically active, to reveal racism. For example, in Norwegian history, and he was on the council, and he says, a system is built up where you protect each other, where you give money to colleagues and then get something in return. It's a I'll scratch your back, you'll scratch mine situation. But what really impressed itself upon me was that there was a Russian artist here, and she talks about how criticizing the Culture Council led to her not being able to get grants, and that her friends would say to her, shut up, that's what we do. And when we get on the council, we give our friends money. So you're just being stupid. But she says she was, as a young woman, she was in the Soviet Union. She was, the KGB tried to make her rat on systemic critical friends. And she's saying that it was easier then because people saw clearly the injustice here. But in Norway, with this system, things are made to look very pretty and beautiful, and so it becomes even harder to navigate. And then I'm thinking, this is not just sort of, oh, we want to get in. These are people who are working within what is accepted as contemporary art, and they still see that this is camaraderie and nepotism.
Yeah. And I think this article is 3-4 years old, so it's interesting to, now you can backcheck, see what happened with these people.
Yeah.
It's like someone who left North Korea, go to South Korea or something. So I looked up, I even went to a speech that one of the artists there had, Lars Kusner, in the article.
Right, who talked about I'll scratch your back, you'll scratch mine. And he was on the council himself in some years.
Yeah. So I went to his speech where he, I could hear some frustration. He said that he was even worried about the consequences in the article. I believe he said that the next time he applied for money, he received a ridiculous small amount of money so
they can say they gave it to him. Everything's fair.
Here you have $100 to live on this year.
Yeah.
Okay, good luck.
So we gave him money.
So that perhaps even stronger sign, because he couldn't even use that as an argument then.
Yeah.
But then I looked him up on Facebook recently. He was very active on a group of people who had been evicted from their apartments now. So I'm not sure what.
Okay, I see the connection you're making.
Yeah. So he doesn't seem to do very well, and I haven't seen him on any of the lists. So he seems to be out of this group of people now.
Yeah, that reminds me of have you seen that movie? In English, it's called something like The Life of Others or something. That's like a literal translation. It's about the communist system in Eastern Germany, and they are playing this from an interrogation tape where they are interrogating a man for 48 hours, and they're sitting in an auditorium, like a university lecture about how you shall destroy people psychologically. And then one of the students says, "Oh, but this is inhumane, after 48 hours, no sleep." And then the guy who does the lectures just looks down at the paper, puts a little cross next to that guy's name, and for the rest of the movie you see him working in the basement opening post.
Yeah.
But because I really want to stress that this is not someone who's a classical figurative and then who's complaining and whining about being a victim. This is someone who's really into mainstream, typically political art. At least that example where he made that Congo village in the middle of a park in Norway to show the racism of early 19th century Norway or 20th century. So it's not just about it's not something that we're making up.
No,
and you're coming in it from not a specific ideological standpoint in the first place.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. So I'm sure people have noticed this, and he even talks about this in his speeches now. So it's a suicide to do this. And another thing is they probably haven't learned a craft. It's not like you can start to be a figurative painter once you've been in this milieu for a few years. and actually sell stuff.
Right.
So yeah.
So your education makes you dependent on public grants.
Yeah, that's what I imagine. Yeah. Let's see. Another artist that I've had a more interaction with is who has also been politically active, was Henrietta Peterson. I thought it was fun when I posted one of her videos, and she rushed to the comment section and was very well. She basically said that I just suck out as much money as possible from the taxpayers, and I'm gonna get more, and I'm gonna make even more stupid art. So sort of taunting the people who felt like this was a waste of their money. So I was kind of curious, will this have any consequences? And so I've been sort of following her after this. And I'm not sure if what I post really has any direct consequences for the artist, but if there is one, it's actually that I improve their position, I improve their standing within the bureaucracy, I think. Because
some of them have gotten more support from the Culture Council, like moral support, but also more money, and even what do you call it when you get it annually, as opposed to not getting it annually before.
Yeah, I have very few examples of artists that have lost funding after I posted any of their work, but I have a lot of examples of artists that received a lot more funding.
Right.
So she was on kind of a funding program which was like the second tier, or like if you follow English football, the championship. So the dream for this group of people is they see it as a lot of hassle to apply for money every year for every individual project. So their dream is to get to the first tier, to get to the Premier League of Norwegian art funding, which is a program where you get a fixed amount of money for perhaps 4 years. You don't have to apply for each program specifically, so you have a lot of liberty to do what you want. I cannot remember many cases where an artist had lost funding after I posted their work on Facebook. It's only one example I can remember of a Swedish man who used to paint with his butt. But that might have been related to a Me Too case where he lost his job. So then he lost a lot of friends in that case. But one interesting example is one artist I've interacted with, Henrietta Peterson. She used to rush to the comment section to sort of taunt my followers, saying openly that she sucked out as much tax money as possible. I'm going to get a lot more money from you guys, and I'm going to make art that you hate.
Because of your activity.
Yeah. Now that,
and she has gotten more.
Yeah, so and even in the comment section, people said that, wow, I can't believe you're this arrogant. I'm going to take a screenshot and send to the Cultural Council. So it's not the sort of thing I do, or I don't like to dox people that way. But I was curious, what is this going to lead to? So the next year she had been promoted to the highest tier art funding. So now I think she received a promise of 15 million kroner or something over a 4-year period.
$1.5 million.
Something like that. It might be a nuanced difference, but yeah. So she hit the jackpot there right after this. I'm not saying it's necessarily a connection, but yeah, it seems to be a trend that you don't lose a standing with the Cultural Council by becoming my rival. Definitely not.
Right. And then you could sort of slipping into a discussion about what do you do with the situation. Do you think, I mean, it's kind of in some way an unfair question to ask because you haven't come into this from sort of an activist or ideological standpoint, but do you think that this Christmas calendar is the wrong way to go about it, or has it had positive effects when a positive effect is seen as, you know, reducing support of the arts and that the state should not intervene?
Well, one typical criticism is why expose the artist when the real bad guy here is the Cultural Council, and I understand that point. It is fair. In a perfect world, I could write a text about the negative sides of the Cultural Council, but you know, it's a reason why people perform art. It's a reason why people don't write books. You know, the artists also could perform their message by just write a book, but a visual image gives stronger connotations. Like activates more emotions and different kind of understanding. So in very few cases, I feel a little bit bad for the people I have sort of exposed, but it has definitely brought more attention than if I wrote a paragraph.
Yeah, and I think it's not a question of going in there to, as you say, sort of dox people, but you're just showing what is going on.
Yes.
I mean, if I like to drink coffee and you say on Facebook, you know, we like to drink coffee, I can't be angry at you. It's like I should be able to take that if I do like drinking coffee.
Yeah, fair. And I. It's not like I sneak into the theater with a hidden camera either.
No, because I mean, in many cases, you're just referring to articles in newspapers on the net or on national newspapers or whatever.
Yeah, actually, every case, because I haven't recorded none of these. I haven't recorded myself any of these videos. They are the artists post themselves on YouTube or Vimeo. So you can't really say that it's bad in itself to show these videos on Facebook.
So getting to some questions from the audience and drifting into more of a sort of discussion of what is the right way to go about reforming or abolishing, as I sort of tend to lean to, but there are definitely pro and cons here. Here's one question on I think this is from Facebook. How do you envisage reformed funding for the arts as well as the crafts of painting, drawing, sculpting, music?
Yeah, I've not really involved myself in the kind of art that you are working with, so I'm not sure how the funding works in that case. So I shouldn't really say anything about. But one way is just to scale back the funding, reduce how much money they get from the overall state budget. It's not really my role to say much more than that. But I guess in theory, I know the way the Cultural Council sponsors films in Norway. It's more closely linked to the number of tickets you sell. So you can still get a lot of funding there, but if you don't attract any visitors, any viewers, then you are in a tough situation.
Yeah, but then there's also this thing about, I think I could say that you and I share the attitude that it's not a matter of hindering people to do stuff, but when under the guise of culture, state support for culture, when you get political activism and you get nepotism, friendships, and corruption, then that's when it becomes squandering. That's when it becomes something the state shouldn't be engaged in.
Right.
Because it's in many cases, I just see it as hidden political propaganda.
Yeah, right. I don't have a plan for the Cultural Council really, rather than just reducing the funding. I guess you can make an effort to say that the council should be politically neutral. You could say that, but they already say that. It's already supposed to be neutral. And
they talk about high artistic quality without defining it.
Yeah, so I guess that's sort of already coded into the intention of the council, but they don't really care about that. They use it for their political agenda, and no one's trying to stop them, really.
So here's another question from Facebook. The most active supporters of such public spending typically claim that these subsidies are in fact a question of the existence of culture and art. How would one counter such a claim, and would you in some degree agree?
Well, I guess some forms of art might struggle, but it's a very pessimistic view to say that people don't want art if they can choose. I believe people want art, and art has always existed. We will always have art. It might be a different form than we have today, but as long as we have artists and people who enjoy art, then people will find each other. I can't see anything else.
And I think I also think it's a false dichotomy between state funding and the private market, because the people who operate in the private market choose the same things as the state is now choosing. So I mean, the whole table is just set for that type of those type of expressions in any case. So
I'm not worried about that at all. Individual artists might be worried about their personal income if they absolutely don't want to reach an audience, of course. It's going to be difficult without the state. But no, I think the art field could thrive, absolutely.
And I think that just makes the case even stronger, that like you say, you don't come into this with some kind of a cultural, ideological agenda. And also when you have examples of people working within really accepted contemporary art who are also strongly critical to the friendship component here, then I think that's a pretty solid case for that things are being spent the wrong way.
Yeah, I guess you could make an effort that each political party could pick a representative to try to make it more politically balanced, but it's not necessarily going to be a clean thing anyways. I'm not sure
you always get the thing about who's sitting in the jury, and in what view are they educated. And I'm thinking, I've been waiting for quite a long time, but introducing the centerpiece here, which is by Sebastian Salvo. And the reason why we have that here is that you could, I mean, this is, you could understand this as some kind of a case going on here in front of the court, or the king here. So you could easily imagine this as some kind of a big, like, sketch for a big painting hanging in some new court building or whatever. Now, I know enough about the cultural field to know that this will never happen, because the people who are the experts there are educated in the typical contemporary art field and will never allow it. But there's another interesting example by a colleague of mine. She was also a student of Nerdrum, and she paints classical figurative, but she lives in a very small place. And she got a commission, quite large painting, and I think she got like over $20,000 for that. But the thing that I noticed, and I asked her about that, is that in the jury you had the principal of the school, and you had the local politicians. So you didn't have experts, historical experts, and that's why it could happen. And because the other example, sort of school example of what happens when you get an expert is in another small place in Norway. They were building this sort of home for the elderly and the disabled, and there were some they wanted to have some illustrations there, some works hanging there, but when they got a state-approved expert, then they got, I think, $3-4 million more to build that home. And so, of course, they chose typical, sort of conventional contemporary art with some threads hanging from the roof or whatever, from the ceiling or whatever. And I think that's my beef with this, that you cannot, you get the experts in, they're educated in one specific view, so they can say high artistic quality on the Culture Council homepage, but you get monoculture out at the other end.
Right. Yeah. I agree with that. And I think before I came here, we briefly just discussed the history of the Cultural Council, and I did some research on that, and that was very interesting. If you go on their website, you can see the Cultural Council was started in sometime in the 60s, I think, 1965, I believe. But it's actually, it was a little bit earlier. We had a different form of a cultural council that was started by the Norwegian Nazi Party in 1942. And that was very interesting to see sort of the rationale behind why they started a cultural council. I searched into...
You're talking about the Norwegian Nazi Party.
Yes. Yeah. So it was started by Department of Culture. The minister there used to be a chief of propaganda for the Nazi Party, and then he became the Minister of Culture because they felt that this was a field to spread ideas.
I think the initial name is quite revealing. It would translate as the culture and I have to translate literally, the Culture and People Enlightenment Department. Something.
Yes, and yeah. So I found the old articles from Aftenposten from those days when this was founded. And what was very interesting there was the rationale was exactly the same as the current kind of cultural council. Yeah. They talked about the arm's length principle. They were so happy that this would not be controlled by the politicians. They would... It was an advisory council by the leading artists.
High artistic quality?
High artistic quality. Definitely. This would not have anything to do with politics. But of course you can see what happened. This was...
Oh my God.
So then I was kind of curious, what kind of things did they fund? And the next article I found a couple of months later, they supposed to make some new movie about the Vikings trying to Nazify the Viking history, of course. So tie their pride of Viking heritage to some kind of Nazi agenda. So that's so that kind of
high artistic quality.
Yeah. So the arm's length. I can't even say it.
Arm length distance.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This. Thank you. It's a joke, really, because you put the right people in there, they're gonna do what you intend them to, anyways. And it's the same thing here. I'm not saying they are the next Nazi party or anything.
But if they were,
yeah.
No, but I mean, a quick note on that. We can't do the whole cultural historical thing, although that's really interesting. It always strikes me when you talk about reducing support for culture, for the arts, then of course they would start saying you're fascist or you're Nazi or whatever. And the total irony is that, of course, Adolf Hitler represents an unprecedented increase in the culture budget, state cultural budget. And you had this horrible sculptor, Arno Breker, who made these massive figures. They appear like they cannot move because they're supposed to be strong Aryan men. And it's the example of how state experts choose what the state shall have and how it totally sucks.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing, the quality coming out on the other end of state intervention, but the whole irony of that they're saying if you want to reduce it, then you're a Nazi, but not, they represent a big increase in the cultural budget.
Yeah, and it's also the history of Nazis. They want to intervene specifically into saying what forms of art are bad and what's good, and aim the funding specifically at the things they liked. But in my view, the message I send out is completely opposite. We should not have a strong the state should not have a strong hand in this game. And I even discuss this with people who support a strong state control of the art, and they think that they are the good guys. Even it's hard to comprehend from my point of view.
But then there's a question we talked about it in the Campos team, and this thing about if you could get sort of if the Cultural Council then could get some kind of objective criteria of quality that could make them support what is considered classical culture, where you have specific skills that you need to master, and you can objectively identify those skills. Would you be against state support for that? Or it's like, is your take reform or abolish, or like where do you fall on that?
Well, I definitely see that as a lesser evil.
Right.
Yeah, I of course have to be nuanced in this. It's not like every kind of art funding is the same. And as I mentioned earlier, I've just looked at 2 out of the 70, 80 programs where they send out distribute money. So definitely nuances here. That would probably be an improvement, although it's not something I sort of spend my time advocating.
Right. How about this idea of I mean, like I mentioned, I don't think you would see the day where this could be a commission for some public building. But the example I mentioned from that little town or village, where she got that commission because there were no experts in the jury.
Yeah.
Now that's like, they pride themselves with saying we have an arm's length distance, there should be no politicians there, but just experts. But clearly when that happens, this doesn't have a chance. So like, do you have any specific position on if there should be a popular jury? I mean, we talked about it, this idea that, for example, there should be, 4 quote-unquote normal people who are not sort of educated within the arts, and then you have 3, like one less, that are educated within the arts. And these 3 would have to convince the 4 to get funding for the typical things that you've been highlighting. This
is difficult. In my view is that good artists will find their audience anyways. So if I was a dictator tomorrow, I wouldn't really I wouldn't try to set up a system like that anyways. But I understand there could be an improvement, although it's always difficult to see how the incentives play in and what the result is going to be. Like, even though if a person is not expert, he could have all sorts of views that could be good or bad, or this is not really my things I advocate. Yeah,
because I've been talking about like in different fora, talking about dismantling the culture department, that the state at the most should just be concerned with the, protecting like old churches and libraries, stuff like that are sort of undeniably part of the national heritage, but funding for what is made of new things today should be completely cut. But I can see that there is you can fall into a sort of a liberalist purism trap. I mean, I jokingly always say that if you're a true libertarian, you cannot buy something made in a factory because that's a collective, and I stand for individualism. And it becomes absurd. Like a socialist can never own something because you should be a socialist. So you can fall into that trap, and to some extent, you have to just look at the situation and try to work with what actually exists now. So there are several examples we could discuss now at the very end here, but for example, one example I heard about from an Irish painter, Molly Judd, is that apparently they've at least had a system where if you are registered as an artist or someone making culture, working within the culture field, you get, I think that we're talking about a 50,000 euro, what do you call it? You almost start paying taxes after 50,000 euros. And I've been really fond of that idea because in that case, you don't have to be really nervous about next month's rent. You can start investing things instead of you spending, I don't know, 10, 14,000 euros on taxes. You can invest that in your own business. Like, what do you think about that? Do you have any sort of opinions on that? I mean,
yeah, anything that saves taxpayer money, I'm happy for that.
Yeah.
I guess the artist would still say that you need to cover your expenses in some way. Maybe you can't even sell your paintings, and taxes wouldn't be a problem even in that case.
Yeah.
So that I guess that would be a counter argument, but yeah, that could be the case. It would still be difficult to see, like, how do you decide who gets to be counted as an artist and get this tax refund? So that's definitely a valid counter argument. You could, but thinking about it, you could, perhaps the right way to go about it is not to talk about cultural politics, but just talk about business. If you're a small business owner, if you're a ceramicist or a painter or someone setting up some kind of a computer help company or whatever, you can have that to make sure that your business has a sort of solid basis, and then you become a better taxpayer when you do start making money. Yeah, that would definitely make it easier for small businesses.
And I think the argument for that could be that in that case, you don't have an expert jury, because it's not about culture or not culture, accepted or not accepted, expert or not expert. It's about a business that gets support in the way that the state doesn't intervene. And I think that, from a libertarian standpoint, could be the least action that the state could perform. I mean,
I'm not sure if the artists we talk about would even acknowledge this as support, though. They're not receiving cash into their bank account. But
but I mean, in that case, not to really start with sort of trying to dismantle the system, but just giving an extra alternative that doesn't really cost much. As you say, a lot of painters, and this is a valid thing. I talked about it also with old Nerdrum, and I said, well, yeah, the problem could be then, well, if you're a classical figurative, you don't really have a market in any case. So maybe that doesn't do that much, but at least you get the excitement of actually making your own money and getting a sort of foreseeable future.
Yeah, I can't really say much more about that, but sounds like an improvement. But.
Yeah. So, but how about? I think one last point, or at least, towards the end here. Have you had any thoughts about citizen payment? Citizen salary. Would that be something?
well,
I mean, this is sort of drifting into sort of general politics, I guess, but...
Yeah, well, that would be sort of scaling your program into the whole population in a way.
Yeah.
It's a little bit difficult. I think the idea is very good until I sort of get into the numbers of it.
But I heard arguments being presented. I think it was Öde Nerdrum. In any case, the point is, I guess, a valid counter-argument that if you should talk about the typical conservative or libertarian standpoint, saving money, then apparently this should cost less money because you don't cut on other support systems within the state, and instead they just get, one check.
It might be that it is a case, but I'm not sure if it actually will save money. Uh-huh. I think NAV, the government agency the welfare agency, they have around 20,000 people employed. So if if this program was paid well enough to close down NAV, you could sort of save or free up those resources, 20,000 jobs. Mm-hmm. But like how much money would you need to receive for it to be politically possible to close NAV, you think? Mm. Yeah, and then you can sort of imagine single mom in Oslo with high rent. You would probably need to pay 30,000 kroners to every person, I imagine, or 25,000
per month.
Yeah. And you have almost eaten up the whole government budget then. Mm-hmm. That's going to be 1 trillion kroner, and the whole budget is 1.5 trillion.
The argument would be that you have to cut there and then start there, but I guess a transitional period would be a challenge.
Well, in the transitional period where you pay this to people and also have the NAV bureaucracy, you have the both bad sides of the story. And even if you are able to implement this, to me it sounds like you need to pay the whole government budget out to people for this to. I mean, people won't accept this if you receive 5,000 or 10,000 kroner. Mm-hmm. You can't close every welfare project with that. People are. It's not going to be politically feasible. So
realistically, you're sort of more reform guy.
Well, in the end, I don't really want to use this persona to talk about how to tax people or how hard to tax people. Yeah. I want to instead talk about how it is spent, so that you have one group of people who want to strengthen the welfare state, and my message to them is we have to cut all the waste then to have a good welfare system.
Okay.
Another group of people, they are very concerned about stopping the oil revenues. We shouldn't drill for more oil. And to those people, I say we can't waste 200 billion kroner per year if we're gonna lose that revenue. So, and then to the
prioritizing.
Yeah, and then also to the third group of people, like the libertarians or people who want to cut taxes. Then, if you want to cut taxes, you want to cut spending. So this message of not wasting tax money should be useful for all three groups. Mm. So that's why I don't really go much into talking about what the tax level should be, because that's sort of a political discussion beyond my mandate that I've given myself here. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I also think that's why one of the reasons the Facebook page has become pretty popular, because it is, I think I have some useful bit of information for every political side here.
Right. Yeah, because for someone wanting to increase or at least keep up the level of the social welfare state, squandering should be a problem.
Yes, you can, like one person has sort of become my nemesis. Probably the most popular video I made was the guy who pumped paint inside his butt and spray painted it on the wall. So this kind of butt painting has become a form of a meme. I see that word being mentioned everywhere. Like discussions about some kind of retirement home being closed. Then in the comment section you see people that refer to, we could have kept it open if it hadn't been for the butt painting.
Okay.
So even from that point of view, where the welfare state is what you hold most sacred, then butt painting is a bad idea.
Right. So, okay, so last thing then, and maybe it's unfair to ask you, you just have to let me know. There's another thing that we discussed in a team here. The problem generally with libertarians and conservatives, politicians, is that they don't really have a conception of culture. And I mean, obviously from the libertarian perspective, you would say, well, that shouldn't be our role to have any plans for society. But I think the problem, as I see it, is that leftist parties, social democrat parties, they do have a plan for society. So I think libertarians or conservatives, whether you agree with them or not, they need to get to be more conscious and to have some kind of at least value of what they value within culture, because if not, they just leave the field open for the political opponents. Do you have any viewpoints on that? Or?
Yeah, I see your point. It usually sounds better that someone has a plan compared to not having a plan.
Yeah.
But maybe I can make a parallel to, in some cases, we don't think that. Like, if I said I had a plan for what kind of friends you should have, or I have a plan for your next wife, we don't want people to have a plan in that case. And perhaps
but
art
at least
is
some kind of idea, some like Bork Nerdrum, our producer, was saying that the right has to brand itself more as or you know, that side of the political aisle has to brand itself more as having certain values, certain principles.
Right.
Not making a great scheme for the actual cultural politics, but at least voicing some idea of anything other. I mean, not only saying, "Oh, we shouldn't do anything about it."
Well, you could argue that individual freedom is a value in itself. Although, yeah, I see your point. I'm probably not going to use my Facebook page to become to promote a certain field of art, but you could be right. But I also hope people could view art as a field where individual freedom should roam in the same way. We don't like arranged marriages, or we like autonomy in some areas of our lives, and perhaps art should be one of those.
Well, Squandering Ombudsman, that's a really nice way to end this conversation. Thank you for coming.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It was an honor.
And thank you for watching. Remember, you can support our show at patreon.com/caveofapellis, and I'll see you next month.